Here is the final review for the game Cocoon. Make sure if you enjoy what you're hearing that you leave a like on this video, or if you want to listen to the entire podcast, Ferris64 on all podcast platforms, even YouTube. Let's jump into Cocoon, which is by the same person who created Limbo and Inside, two very good games in my opinion. Both of them kind of horror themed, and Cocoon kind of totes is kind of what's the saying? It kind of is on that edge of being a bit horror related, but not really. There's some sections that are intense for sure, and there's some imagery that is kind of horror-ish, but for the most part, it is less horror and more just like a top-down kind of exploration puzzle game. And much like in the style of Limbo and Inside, the visual style of the game is very strong. The visuals are very well done in the game. It definitely looks great. The top down perspective is new for this developer. They usually do 2D side scrolling games. And much like those other 2D side-scrolling games, Cocoon is also a one-hit kill kind of game. But you really don't have combat until you get to like a boss encounter, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So the main crux of Cocoon, you wake up and you're on like this desert world, and you find this orb, and the orb allows you to travel to a different world, I guess. And you can actually pick up orbs and put them inside each other and use them inside each other. And it gets real, like, this concept gets pretty complicated by the end of it. You started by just kind of like, oh, this orb can do this. And I can walk around and use the orb for switches and pressing and activating platforms, and it can do all sorts of things. I guess the game is a bit basic in a way where it's just like walking around and pressing one button, but they do a lot with that concept. Let me tell you, this orb can do so many things just on its own without any of the multi-world orbing. It's pretty impressive what they've done with this game. So once you defeat the first boss, now the orange orb can reveal pathways and allow you to walk on things that were not there before. Pretty cool. It's a great way of pushing the game forward, and you really can't go backward in the game. Much like Limbo and Inside, there's really no going backwards in the games. So the same thing happens here, where they close off paths once you've done everything you possibly do, or everything that the main game requires you to do, and then you move on. So you go from pressing switches and lifting platforms with your orb to walking across platforms and making platforms appear out of nowhere, having the orb be in many different places at once, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard to really explain because you kind of got to play the game in order to kind of fully understand it. So I'll try my best. But eventually you get to like a point where like you get an orb that shoots, I guess, lasers or whatever you want to call it, the short little lasers, and you put another orb in front of it with an orb inside of it, and the laser goes into that orb and then hits the other orb inside of it, and then that hits a switch. It's one of those puzzles and one of those things that's like really like, whoa, that just did that. And this game is full of those moments where the puzzle is just so perfectly executed, and when you finally figure out exactly what they want you to do, you have that, I don't know, maybe not jaw dropping moment, but you have that moment of like eureka, and you move on to the next thing, or maybe you almost get it and you feel like you have that eureka moment, but then they're like, oh, but you got to go back and get this ball. How are you going to go back and get that orb? It's one of those funny things. It's like, okay, all right, you got me, you got me, you got me, Mr. Carlson. Um, so yeah, it's one of those games that, like, if you enjoyed Limbo and Inside, it definitely is not the same as either of those games, but I think you would enjoy this one, even if you don't like those two games. This one is something completely different from the same developer. That is definitely worth your time. It's worth playing. It's on Game Pass, so you could try it out for like $5 a month, which is not that bad at all. Or you can grab it on Steam for a pretty low price. I think it's like $10 or something like that, or 20. It's not too bad at all, and it's definitely worth every penny for this game. It just the music is amazing. The graphical style is fun. The encounters with bosses are interesting. I loved the boss fights in this game. It kind of reminded me of Fury for a minute, but it also, you really don't have any offensive capabilities, but you can grab things and throw them at the boss, or I don't want to give too much away because it is a very, very fresh game. The game's not too long. It's going to take you about 4 hours to beat, but the amount of just unique and fun puzzles is overwhelming sometimes. Like there's just so much going on. Even until the very end, they're throwing some new thing at you, and I really just smiled my whole way through this game. It was definitely a game that you kind of get once in a while where it's like, oh yeah, this is just all gelling so well. This is just like the peak of an indie studio doing everything that they're good at while also expanding their horizons and doing stuff that they have never done before. And that is super cool. Love that. Love that a lot. Sure, a lot of the early puzzles are a bit basic. Oh, all you got to do is pull this thing here and then walk over it. Wow. But very quickly as it moves on, it does start to really layer on top of itself, and it's kind of how, I mean, the game Cocoon is kind of, a layering on layering on layering on layering game, and there's so much going on. I forgot to mention that a lot of the characters in the game, or I guess enemies, bosses, even your character yourself, they're kind of like hybrids between machine and insect, which is a really cool, and that's kind of where the horror aspect comes from, because you have these large beasts that are like kind of mechanical, kind of organic, insect like. I think inherently a lot of people are afraid of insects or don't like insects. Whether it be a cicada or a spider, or, well, I guess a spider's an arachnid, but still my point stands, where it does have that uneasy feeling at times because the creature design is so weird. It's so interesting, and you yourself are this weird amalgamation of machine and flesh, and it's one of those cool things. And unlike Limbo and Inside, well, I guess unlike Limbo, there really isn't a depressing slant to this one, and unlike Inside, it doesn't. The message in that one in Inside is something individuality. you know. This one, the message is a little bit more jumbled, I would say. It's not as in the front, so it does make you think about it a little bit, and you got to realize what exactly the creator is going for in this one. So all in all, I would definitely 100% recommend Cocoon. If you like puzzle games, you're gonna have it's a unique and experimental puzzle game. If you like games from this developer, um, Jeppe Carlson, then yeah, you're definitely gonna want to try this one out. Why haven't you already? That's why haven't you? And if you don't think that either of those things are your vibe, I would kind of say try it out anyway. A lot of people are afraid of trying something different, trying something new. You don't have to play Fortnite all the time. You can try something different, and this is definitely something different, and it's something that's really well executed. I don't think the puzzles are so difficult that you're going to get frustrated. I did get stuck on a couple puzzles here and there for sure, but I really only had to really stop and I got really like stuck pretty much all the way at the end when it was supposed to be a bit more difficult of puzzles to solve. So I think that the puzzle solving is open, and it allows you to ease yourself into it, and you don't. I mean, I would say most people probably aren't going to get stuck for too long on most of these puzzles, but they do get more difficult as they go on. It's not like the Talos principle where kind of immediately off the bat you're given some pretty tough things to solve. It does warm you up to the idea of how these orbs work and what they can do, and what your character can and can't do. And I think that's great. I think it does a good job of easing the player into it and then making things progressively more difficult or more intricate. And the boss fights, I mean, they're not going to take you too long to beat. I really was only stuck on like the third boss fight for for a couple of tries, and that was it. I think that they're mostly there just to kind of give you a little bit of an intense of that intensity. You know, one hit kill. Oh my god. And the bosses are a bit of a puzzle in themselves as well. So very good. I really loved Cocoon. This is definitely going to be one of my favorite games this year. And this is probably what the second game that I'm going to give a 5 out of 5 to. So definitely check this one out. And that was the final review for Cocoon.